My name is Charlotte Brown, and at 30 years old. The first time I felt that tight, sinking knot in my stomach, I didn't know what it was. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just that subtle whisper of unease I had learned to trust over the years. My name is Charlotte Foster. I'm 29, and for the past 8 months, Daniel has been living with me in my apartment. We've been together for 2 years. I thought I knew him. I thought I could trust him. But sometimes the heart notices things the mind wants to ignore. It was a Wednesday evening when it started. I had just finished tidying up the kitchen after a long day at the office. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of lavender from my candle, and the distant honking of traffic outside our window created the kind of domestic lull I had grown to love. That's when Daniel walked in, brushing past the doorframe with a confident, casual grin that felt a little too practiced. "Charlotte," he said, tossing his jacket over the couch. "Vegas next weekend. My friends. Guy trip. Total freedom. Phones down, no check-ins, no tracking apps. It's going to be epic." I forced a smile. "Sounds fun," I said, though the words felt hollow, even to me. There was a slight hesitation in his eyes, just a flicker, like he was weighing how much I could handle. I noticed it immediately. "Seriously," he continued, leaning against the counter, hands tucked in his pockets. "I mean, total digital detox vibes. Just us guys. Don't worry about me." His casual insistence, the way he emphasized, "don't worry," set off a little alarm bell in my mind. Vegas with no check-ins? He had never been the type to hide his phone before. There was a practiced ease in the way he said it, a way of brushing off concern before it could even form. My heart thudded a little faster, a rhythm of warning I couldn't quite ignore. "Okay," I said softly, my voice almost a whisper. "Have a good time." He smiled, leaned in, kissed me on the cheek, and the air should have felt warm. But it didn't. It felt brittle, like stepping onto glass you couldn't see. And as he walked to the bedroom to start packing, my mind churned. Something was off. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew enough to be wary. Later that night, when the apartment had fallen into its usual quiet rhythm and Daniel was asleep, I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the feeling in my chest tightening like a fist. My fingers itched, a nervous energy I couldn't shake. I had access to his phone. He trusted me, as I trusted him. For emergencies, we shared passcodes. Just once, when he had locked himself out, I had proved reliable. I unlocked it. There it was, in all its small, sinister detail, a thread of messages with someone named Ashley Jim. At first, I thought maybe I was reading it wrong. Workout routines, travel plans? No. The words screamed something else entirely. Flirtatious. Intimate. Weeks of them weaving a secret world I wasn't part of. "Can't wait for Vegas. 3 days, just us. Bring that red thing I like." My hands shook. I scrolled, screen after screen, 6 weeks of deception. Each message, a dagger. My chest burned, my vision blurred, but I kept scrolling. I took screenshots, every single one, saved in a cloud folder for clarity, for proof. I set the phone back exactly where it had been. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the apartment quiet except for the soft hiss of the heater. I thought about how much of my life was tied to this man. The apartment was mine. I had bought it years before we met. Daniel had moved in, and for 8 months our lives had intertwined, but in ways that now felt fragile. I paid for most of the utilities. I had co-signed his car loan. I had trusted him. Every ounce of that trust now felt like a fragile glass bridge, cracked beneath me. The next morning, I made a decision. Not rash, but deliberate. I had to reclaim control. I had to protect myself, my home, and my dignity. My emotions were still raw. Shock, betrayal, disbelief. But my mind was calm, precise. I contacted a locksmith, scheduled a professional packing service, and began organizing everything Daniel had brought into my apartment. Not in anger, but in methodical preparation. I needed to see boundaries restored, the air cleared, the deception ended. As I watched the movers arrive, the meticulous efficiency of their work, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and empowerment. Each box packed, each piece of his life removed from my home, was a small reclaiming of myself. My apartment was my sanctuary again, my domain, and yet every stuffed garment, every carefully folded shirt reminded me of what had been lost. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected. I thought about the past 2 years, the laughter, the intimacy, the love I had felt, and how it had all been tainted by secrecy. Trust, once broken, could not be pieced back together lightly. I had always known that relationships required vulnerability, that to love someone fully meant risking betrayal. But I never imagined it would come like this. So subtle, so hidden, so meticulously disguised. The knot in my stomach hadn't gone away. It had evolved into a firm resolve. I would not let betrayal become my reality. I would act decisively, and I would protect myself, even if it meant enduring the heartbreak that followed. And in that quiet, candlelit apartment, I understood that the story of Daniel and me was ending, not with screams, not with chaos, but with a silent, unstoppable assertion of my own strength. The first step had been taken. The storm was coming, and I was already standing in the center of it. The morning after my quiet, calculated reclaiming of my space, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had merely scratched the surface of a much larger truth. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold before I even took a sip. The apartment was silent, the way it should have been, yet every sound, my own breath, the hum of the refrigerator, echoed in my mind like a warning. I tried to focus on work, on emails, on anything that could distract me, but my thoughts kept circling back to Daniel. I replayed the previous evening over and over, the casual way he had announced his trip, the flicker in his eyes when I had asked him a question about Vegas, the unnatural ease with which he had dismissed my unease. And then I thought about Ashley Jim. That thread of messages was a line cut through our life together, an incision that revealed something I hadn't wanted to see. I debated whether I should confront him immediately, demand an explanation, demand the truth. But every instinct whispered no, not yet. I needed clarity, proof, and time to process the betrayal without being hijacked by anger or tears. So I did the only thing I could. I spent the day methodically combing through the threads of his digital life that I had glimpsed. Every message, every emoji, every casual LOL and can't wait was laid bare. Weeks of flirtation, intimate jokes, and plans for secret time together. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. Daniel had been cultivating a hidden world, a secret connection that existed entirely without me, without my knowledge, without the commitment he had promised. "You're so bad, I love it. Bring that red thing I like. 3 days just us, Vegas, can't wait." The messages were playful on the surface but intimate, suggesting a level of intimacy that went far beyond mere texting. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My hands trembled, but I didn't stop reading. I needed to know the full extent. As I scrolled, a torrent of emotions washed over me. Disbelief, rage, betrayal, heartbreak. I felt my own eyes sting with tears, but I refused to let them fall. I had to be present, vigilant, precise. I imagined Daniel walking through the apartment, oblivious to the storm I was navigating. He had no idea that the secret world he had created was now exposed, if only to me for now. It wasn't just the messages themselves, it was the calculated consistency of them. Every Saturday evening, every late-night message, every small coded phrase, they were patterns. I could see how he had hidden it in plain sight, disguised as casual chats, a hidden thread beneath the surface of our life. And with each discovery, my heart sank deeper. I realized that I had been living with a stranger masquerading as the man I loved. By mid-afternoon, I was numb. My head ached, my chest tightened, but my mind remained sharp. I created a digital archive of everything, screenshots organized by date, backed up to multiple cloud accounts. This wasn't just about confrontation anymore. It was about truth, clarity, and evidence. I needed the knowledge that I was not imagining this, that the betrayal was real, undeniable. I replayed moments from our relationship with new eyes. The weekend he had been at work late, the sudden defensiveness when I asked about friends, the subtle secrecy with his phone. Every inconsistency now had meaning, every excuse a shadow of the truth. I realized I had ignored red flags, dismissing them as quirks or stress. But the truth was undeniable now. When evening fell, I found myself wandering the apartment, touching objects that had been a part of our shared life. A mug he had left on the counter, the blanket on the couch where we had spent quiet nights, the framed photos I had hung on the walls. Each item carried memories, now tainted with deception. And yet, there was a strange clarity in the betrayal. I saw what had been hidden, but I also saw my own strength, the strength to notice, to process, and to act. I didn't need to confront him that night. I didn't need to shout or cry. I simply sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in my own thoughts, letting the truth settle like cold water over my skin. My hands shook as I sipped lukewarm tea, and I felt a quiet resolve forming inside me. This betrayal, as sharp and painful as it was, would not define me. It would not trap me. I would reclaim control of my life, my apartment, my heart. And somewhere beneath the hurt, beneath the ache of deception, I began to feel a flicker of something unfamiliar but necessary: empowerment. I knew what I had to do next, and unlike the raw, impulsive grief that might consume someone else, I felt the calm precision of strategy. Daniel's hidden world would no longer intersect with mine. I made a list, quietly and methodically: the locks, the keys, the professional packing service, the messages organized for proof, boundaries reinforced. Every step was deliberate, calculated, and final. I was preparing for the confrontation, but on my terms, not his. Before bed, I paused by the window, looking out over the city lights. The skyline shimmered, indifferent, as it always did, but somehow comforting in its constancy. I whispered into the night, almost to myself, "I will not let this destroy me." And for the first time in hours, I believed it. The next phase was inevitable. The act of reclaiming my apartment, my space, my boundaries, it was coming. The storm I had sensed the night before was building. I just needed to prepare for it, and I would. Charlotte Foster, 30 minutes ago, scared, uncertain, betrayed. Charlotte Foster now, calm, resolute, and quietly plotting the steps that would ensure she never had to feel powerless again. That was who I was becoming. And that storm, when it hit, would not find me defenseless. The following morning, I woke with a quiet determination I hadn't felt in weeks. The betrayal still burned like an ember in my chest, but it no longer paralyzed me. It sharpened me. Every thought, every movement was deliberate. Today, I was taking back control of my apartment, my life, and most importantly, my dignity. I started with the locks. Daniel had a key, and while we had shared our lives in trust, I knew that trust had been weaponized. I called a locksmith first thing. By mid-morning, the old locks had been replaced with new ones, their mechanisms silent but unyielding. $180 later, my apartment was physically mine again. The sense of safety was immediate, tangible. For the first time in days, I felt the edges of my panic soften. Next came the packing. I contacted a professional moving service, explained the situation briefly but clearly, and within hours, 2 efficient women arrived. They moved with an almost surgical precision, carefully packing every piece of Daniel's belongings: clothes, shoes, toiletries, the casual clutter he had accumulated over months. Even the small trinkets he had left behind, tokens of his presence, were wrapped and labeled. Watching them work, I felt an unexpected relief, a sense of finality settling over the apartment. I didn't intervene much. I didn't need to. Each item carefully placed in cardboard boxes was a small declaration: my home, my rules, my boundaries. I watched, occasionally taking notes for documentation, ensuring there would be no dispute later. Everything was professional, deliberate. My actions mirrored the precision I felt inside. And yet, even as I acted, my mind wandered to Daniel. I imagined the moment he would discover his access had been removed, his belongings packed. I pictured the mix of confusion, frustration, and denial that would inevitably follow. But I didn't act out of revenge. I acted out of necessity, from a place of self-preservation and clarity. By the afternoon, the last box was labeled and ready for transport. My apartment felt lighter, emptier, and yet, in that emptiness, there was a strange sense of empowerment. I had drawn the line, and for the first time in days, I felt fully on the right side of it. Then came the practical steps. I changed the Wi-Fi password, updated streaming service logins, and double-checked security codes for all the entrances. Every digital and physical access point that Daniel had once held was now under my control. This was not just about locks or keys. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my life, ensuring that the betrayal he had orchestrated could not touch me further. I reflected on the past months. on the red flags I had ignored, the defensiveness when I asked questions about his friends, the sudden secretive behavior with his phone, the subtle but persistent evasions. All of it now made sense in the harsh clarity of revelation. I had been too trusting, too willing to rationalize, too eager to see only the man I loved and not the one he had hidden. As evening approached, the apartment was quiet, a silence that was almost sacred. I brewed a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and let the day's actions sink in. I wasn't just moving boxes or changing locks. I was moving past betrayal, asserting control over my life, and refusing to be manipulated. Each detail of Daniel's absence now carried a meaning, a clean slate, a reclaiming of personal power. And then came the anticipation. I knew he would try to reach me, to argue, to justify, to manipulate. I had prepared for that moment as meticulously as I had prepared the apartment. Screenshots saved, records backed up, clear boundaries established. I was ready to face him, not with uncontrolled anger, but with calm, undeniable clarity. At one point, I found myself standing by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. It struck me how small the betrayal seemed compared to the vastness outside, yet how personally devastating it felt. That duality mirrored my own transformation, a shift from chaos to control, from victimhood to agency. I was no longer at the mercy of Daniel's decisions. I was shaping the outcome, deliberately and irreversibly. Night fell, and I sat on the couch, sipping tea, my eyes scanning the apartment. The space was mine. Every object, every surface, every corner now reflected my authority and my reclaimed sense of self. And as the final box was wheeled into the storage unit down the street, a wave of relief washed over me. The storm was no longer an impending threat. It was happening, and I was firmly at its center, unshaken. I allowed myself a moment to acknowledge the mix of emotions swirling inside: hurt, anger, sorrow, but also empowerment, clarity, and resolve. This was not the end of the story, but it was a critical turning point. I had acted decisively, and in doing so, I had preserved my dignity, my home, and my emotional safety. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the quiet hum of the city below, I realized something crucial. Betrayal was not the end of me. It was a catalyst, a moment that forced me to confront reality and reclaim control. I closed my eyes with a sense of quiet determination. Tomorrow, Daniel would realize what had changed. But tonight, the apartment was mine, and for the first time in days, peace settled over me. I was ready for whatever came next. By Monday afternoon, the apartment was quiet in a way that felt permanent, almost surreal. I had prepared everything, acted decisively, and yet, the lingering tension of what was to come weighed on me. Daniel would notice. He would try to reach me, and when he did, I would be ready. Sure enough, the first messages started mid-afternoon. Multiple calls from unknown numbers, texts pleading for explanations, demands to return home. I didn't answer at first. I let the messages accumulate, observing the pattern: frustration, disbelief, denial, and ultimately, desperation. When I finally responded, it was deliberate and calm. One message: your belongings are in the storage unit. Arrange a pickup time. You will not be entering the apartment. Short, factual, and unyielding. No room for manipulation, no space for argument. It wasn't long before I received a call from Derek, Daniel's older brother, sounding cautious and confused. "Charlotte, what happened? She said you kicked her out." I explained simply, methodically. "Her things are packed, professionally handled, and safe. The locks were changed because of the betrayal I uncovered. I'm sorry it has to be this way, but it is necessary." There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that carries shock and disbelief. "Betrayal?" he finally said. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "She was cheating. Weeks of secret messages, trips planned, without me knowing. I documented everything." The line went quiet again, and I could hear Derek processing the reality. Then he muttered, almost to himself, "I had no idea." The first wave of confrontation was over. The messages kept coming, increasingly frantic. "You're a controlling psycho! How could you do this? Give me my things." But I didn't respond. Not in anger, not in fear, just silence. The only action I took was to ensure that the storage pickup would go smoothly, without conflict. Derek arrived the next day with a small U-Haul. Her belongings, now neutral objects devoid of emotional entanglement, were loaded efficiently. She sat in the passenger seat, silent, teary, makeup smudged. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by clarity. She had chosen her actions, and now she faced the consequences. After she left, I returned to my apartment and sank into the sofa, finally allowing myself to breathe. The weight I had carried, the uncertainty, the betrayal, the fear, was lifting. Every lock, every packed box, every boundary enforced was a step toward reclaiming myself. Then came the ripple effects, calls from mutual friends, questions from my parents, and even inquiries from Daniel's coworkers. I answered carefully, truthfully, without defensiveness. The story was simple. She cheated, I ended the relationship, and I protected myself. Over the next few weeks, life settled into an uneasy normal. The apartment felt lighter, cleaner, freer. Small routines, morning coffee, evening walks, the ritual of reading before bed, became anchors in a sea of emotional turbulence. I realized that trust, once shattered, could not be fully restored, and that was okay. My peace was more important than pretending things could be fixed. Unexpectedly, I ran into Sheila, a coworker I had met briefly months ago at a coffee shop. She hesitated, then approached me. "Charlotte, I feel like I should tell you something. She told me the breakup happened because you were controlling, that you went through her phone. Is that true?" I let out a soft laugh, bitter but honest. "Yes," I said. "But there's more to the story. She cheated. I documented everything. The trip, the messages. It wasn't about control. It was about betrayal." Sheila's eyes widened, then softened. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "It's okay," I said. "You didn't know. But now I do, and I've taken care of it. That's enough." That day, I realized something crucial. Life doesn't end with betrayal. Closure doesn't come from apologies, explanations, or reconciliation. It comes from taking back your power, setting boundaries, and moving forward with dignity. I had done all that, and more importantly, I had done it on my own terms. Weeks later, I learned that Daniel was staying with his parents, struggling with the aftermath, telling anyone who would listen that I was cruel, that I had overreacted. But the truth, the real, unassailable truth, was mine. I had acted decisively, protected myself, and reclaimed my life. The apartment, the routines, the small pleasures that had been overshadowed by deceit, all of it was mine again. I had loved, I had trusted, and I had been hurt. But in that hurt, I had found strength. The betrayal had been the catalyst, but it did not define me. It had sharpened me, clarified my values, and shown me that courage sometimes means making hard, lonely decisions for the sake of your own integrity. The apartment was quiet now, peaceful, sometimes lonely, but undeniably mine. I rearranged the furniture, painted a wall, a color I had always loved but never dared to use. I found small joys in routines, in reclaimed freedom, in the unshakable knowledge that I would never allow betrayal to go unanswered. I am Charlotte Foster, 29, survivor of deceit, guardian of my own life. And for the first time in months, I can say, I am free.